What happens when life happens and you go through a scary situation like a plane crash, and then you begin to ask yourself, why me? Our guest for today is Esther Longe, survivor of the 2006 ADC plane crash, who is now a purpose-driven woman with audacious faith. Our topic for today is Crisis of Faith and the Realness of God. My name is Omilola Oshikoya. Welcome to the heart of the matter.
These things sometimes are psychological.
I said it before the financial pastor, as one of the many was enormous.
It was a God experience. I just wanted to find God.
Simply feeling like you're in the virus isn't always so.
Tell us about the solution.
As one
People
of
with
many
18 to 35 years of age out of work.
Hey, I don't have the skill for this particular problem to solve this particular problem.
None of us talked about the bread seller.
Welcome to the heart of the matter. My name is Omilola, and we have with us Esther Longe. Esther, thank you for coming on the heart of the matter.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you today.
Yay.
Okay, so can you tell us about your background, your major influences, what it was like growing up?
Right, okay, so my name is Esther Longe, but that's my married name, so I was Esther Kema Amoda. And, it's a hyphen name, which, gives a bit of background. So my mom and my dad, my mom is Professor Kema, my dad is Professor Amoda, and I grew up with my mom. So that was an interesting period, growing up, because she is still a very strong influence, in my life. So background-wise, I went to school in Lagos, I went to Queen's College, from Queen's College I went to Unilag, and then I worked for a bit before I went to the UK for further studies, so I have a master's, two masters, and I just finished a PhD in...
2 masters and a PhD, you like studying?
Yeah, I think so, but I think it gets to a point where you're like, actually, I think it's time to just stop. But in between that, I also worked in the UK for a couple of years before starting the PhD.
Fantastic. So there's one unique thing about you. You survived a plane crash, the 2006 ADC plane crash. How did that affect you? Did it change your perception of life? Can you tell us about it, and also how it also affected your faith in God?
Right, okay, so in 2006, I was doing my NYSC in Sokoto. I flew to Sokoto. And even going to Sokoto was a big deal, because when I got the posting, I didn't even remember that Sokoto... Yes, I didn't remember that Sokoto was even a state in Nigeria, because last time I heard Sokoto was when we were doing our states and capital in, primary school. And so my mom said I wasn't going to go. But then I told her, I said, if I don't go in this batch, then I'll have to wait for the next batch, and they still push me to the same Sokoto. And so she put me on her laps and said to God, this is my firstborn. I'm putting her into your hands, be with her as she goes. And so she dedicated me to God as I went, for the service here. And it was the hardest 9 months of my life.
Why?
Because it was a strange setting. I'd never been out of Lagos before that. I'm out of Lagos in any other state in Nigeria. And it was a different language. So I was serving at the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria. The air was at the airport. And they didn't speak English, I didn't speak Hausa, so many days I spent in isolation. But I feel like God used that, because before that I was an extrovert, so I used to like to go out, and I think the only time I would stay at home was if I was not feeling well. So I learned to enjoy my own company, for that time, because there was literally nobody else to talk to. And so in October, started feeling antsy, because, and a bit of background, my mom's sister, younger sister, died in a plane crash in 2000. And she was on a missionary journey for Deeper Life Christian Center. She went to Madagascar, and her Kenyan Airways flight crashed into the sea. And they said at the time that we're even lucky that we found a body to bury. And so that affected my mom, because she stopped traveling within, outside of Nigeria, and very soon, even within Nigeria. So going anywhere by air was a really big deal.
So for sending you to Sokoto must have, now I
it
understand
was.
Why she prayed.
She prayed, and then she would fast. So if the flight was on a Wednesday, she would start fasting from Monday night, and she wouldn't break until I got there on the Wednesday. So it was a very hectic period. So every time I had to come back, we had to go through that process. And so one of the days, I said, I wanted to go to one of our service people. She had redeployed back to Abuja and said, we should come. And so I was going to go, but I said, I don't want mom to just start fasting and worrying and so on. So I said, I'll go. And on the Friday,
without telling her.
Without telling her. That's the last time I traveled without telling her. But so I went on the Friday. with one of my other, my roommates at the time. And we went there on the Friday when we were leaving. The plane was full. We had the Sultan of Sokoto and his entourage going. And on the Sunday coming back...
This is from Abuja to Sokoto?
This is from Sokoto to Abuja.
Abuja, okay.
Now, on the plane coming back, actually, before we do that, so on the Sunday morning, I was having my quiet time, and it was our daily bread. Now, what had happened was the pages had, in printing, the pages had been mixed up. So I read the reading for October 17th on the 29th. And the passage was James 4:13-17 that says, who are you that says today you will do this and you will do that? That life is like a vapor. And because I knew I was traveling, I was like, oh Lord, please don't let my life be like a vapor. And so we got to the airport and our flight was delayed. So I was waiting for the flight. I'd never been to Abuja before, so I didn't even know where to go. But being, a like cool chick, I didn't want to ask anybody questions. But the thing about serving at the airport was the people that traveled, because Sokoto is you either have the people that are very rich or you have very poor people. There's no middle class. So the same people that were traveling were the same people, so they keep traveling. So I looked around and I saw people that I knew were going to Sokoto. So I looked and said, when they get up to go, I would just, I will follow them. Now, trying to get on the plane, it started to rain. And it was a torrential rain, the kind of rain that rains in the north, after heat, that kind of heavy rain. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if, they can fly in this weather. But then I said, I don't think they cancel flights every time it rains. And so we got on the flight. Now I was very upset because I used to like to sit in front of the plane, and they had given me a seat in the middle. And so I was trying to sit down, I wasn't sure, and then I heard somebody call my full name, on the plane, and I didn't expect to know anybody on the plane. And somebody just said, Esther Kema Modana, like, who knows me on this plane? And so there was another Esther who was serving, and we used to call her Esther ADC, because she served with ADC, and I was Esther fan, And so she was sitting on the plane and sitting at the back of the plane.
So
now,
she called you? She
called my name. And ideally, I'd have just gone to say hello to her and gone back to my seat. But for some reason, I sat down next to her. And we're about to take off, and I remember praying, because with the what I read in the morning ringing in my mind, I was like, oh Lord, please take control of this flight. But you don't expect anything's going to happen. You're just praying, routine. And so we took off, and we're gaining altitude, and we were like that for 15 minutes. Then the plane dropped. And then it dropped, but we thought it was just normal turbulence, so no big deal. And we went on for a couple more minutes, and it dropped again. By this time, everywhere outside was dark. This is 11 o'clock in the morning. The emergency lights in the plane were on. The Muslims were shouting Allah, Christians were shouting Jesus, children were crying. And I just remember looking out and seeing lightning flash. Next thing I heard, a huge crash. The plane had crashed.
Oh, so it happened so fast?
Yes, so I just had like a bow, do you know what I mean? And literally, the same way I was sitting in the air, I was sitting with my seatbelt strapped, my hand luggage under my seat, but just in front of me was grass. Wow. And so I say to people that I knew that God was real, but then I knew that angels existed that day, because literally from the air, they carried me down. And I say this because the person, Esther, sitting next to me, the impact of the flight, of the crash flung her somewhere else. So it wasn't that, if you're sitting here, everybody's sitting here, landed safely. She was sitting right next to me, and the impact, took her elsewhere. And so I remember being like, is this a dream? What's going on? Because I didn't know where we were. It was still raining, and I didn't know if we had gotten to Kano, or I didn't know where we were. And so I unhooked myself, I had the Motorola Razor then, so I had the clip, but the phone was literally by me, put the phone back in the clip, and then I got out. And then I heard somebody shouting, oh, help me, and it was the Esther. The seat had trapped her under. And so I unhooked her, and then she was the next one. So I had no injuries, and she was the next one after with a dislocated hip. Wow. So of the 106 people on the plane, only 9 survived. Only 9 survived.
Out of 106.
106.
Okay, hold that thought.
Yes,
we're going
please.
on a quick break. We'll continue after the break. Viewers, we'll be right back after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're still talking to Esther Longe. Okay, so before the break, you were telling us about the plane crash. So are you telling me that it wasn't like you felt the plane falling?
No. That's what I said. Literally, it was like the angels just dropped me dropped me because in front of me, the only thing was in front of me was grass. That's how I knew that something had happened. And I didn't black out because people asked me, oh, did you black out and come to? No, I didn't. It was literally like a split second. 1 minute you're looking out, the next minute you're looking in front of you and there's grass.
Wow. And no injuries?
No, so I have a little scar here and it feels like it's God just reminding me that, you know, don't ever forget what I did for you.
Oh, wow.
So just a little scar here to remind me.
So what happened to the rest of the people on the flight?
Right, okay, so with hindsight, because what happened when we got out of the plane, Esther and I saw this...
So she survived?
Yes, she had a dislocated hip, you know, and we got out and there was this Hausa lady crying. She had a broken arm and leg and she was crying, her brother, you know, and I thought that the plane had broken in two. So I thought that we were on one side and people were on the other side. Now, if you look at pictures even on the internet, you'll see that the part of the plane that was intact was the tail part, and that's where we were. So the 9 survivors were in that tail part. But when the ADC people came to the house...
So, but the tail was where there was impact?
That is, so the tail, if you look at the picture, it was like the tail was broken, the fall was broken by a tree.
Okay.
So literally like, you know, a tree broke the fall.
Wow.
So I thought that, oh, another part of the plane was somewhere else. But when the ADC people came to the house, they said that that the other part of the plane was in pieces, that they were walking through body parts.
Wow.
So literally everything
and
that
that's
survived.
where you would have been sitting?
That's where I'd have been sitting.
Wow.
That's where definitely I would have been sitting there, you know. And I mean, people survived with different levels of injuries. So like the governor of Kogi State, he had 3 daughters on the plane. Three daughters, and they survived, but they had burns. I think I heard they were flown to Germany, you know, for their 3rd-degree burns. Wow. So, you know, it just puts in perspective the miracle that God did.
So let's go back to your mom, because
yes, please.
She obviously didn't know you were on this flight.
Yes.
So she must have heard a plane crash, but thought, thank God, Esther wasn't there, she didn't fly.
The wonderful thing about it was, okay, so after the plane crash happened, we found out that the plane had crashed outside the airport. So even though the pilot didn't say anything to us about it, he had spent the time circling around the airport dumping fuel because they had spent time refueling the plane before we took off. And so the people in the airport didn't even know that the plane had crashed outside the airport. So the villagers ran and they got, you know, a truck from the airport. And so they put me and Esther and the other lady I was talking about into the truck because we're the ones that were the least affected. We got to the airport, to the airport hospital, and it was pandemonium. There were so many things happening, and I just had a headache and an irrational desire to be as far away from the airport as possible. So I called my friends who had dropped me in the airport not that long ago, and they came back to pick me. And they took me to a private hospital. And the first thing they did was to give me a morphine drip for the pain. And when I woke up, so my mom called me and said, oh, I heard there was a plane that crashed. I was like, yes, so a plane crashed. I was like, how am I going to tell this woman what happened? So I slept, woke up, and then my housemate, her parents wanted to go and greet my mom to say, oh, this had happened. I said, how can you greet her when she doesn't even know what has happened? So obviously I had to call and tell her. And so I called her, and she gave the phone to my brother and said, I don't know what your sister is saying. I said, she looked in the mirror and she asked God, why me? And God said to her, my grace is sufficient for you, and my strength is made perfect in your weakness. And she held on to that word all through that period. And so I told her, and then they now advised me that instead of staying in the private hospital, because I'll be presumed dead, and literally the earlier Wikipedia entries said, you know, one of the survivors who was presumed dead, you know, is now alive. They said I should go to the general hospital where they were treating the survivors, and that's what I did. So I spent 3 days there for them to make sure I didn't have any internal injuries, which I did not. And because I was one of the most lucid of the survivors, there were a lot of interviews. So, Obasanjo came, Atiku, and all of those people, all asking the same question, what happened? When this happened? 10 years ago, I was 21, going to be 22.
So you were pretty young.
Yeah.
So how did, all of a sudden, you're being interviewed, featured in newspapers, on TV, and you're dealing with a plane crash. Like, how did that affect you?
So I had survivor's guilt, and I had that for 2 years. Because
what's survivor's guilt?
Survivor's guilt is feeling unworthy. And I did, and I still I mean,
like why me?
Why me?
did I
I'm like, what
survive?
kind of gift is this, Lord? What do you want from me? That was the question. What do you want? Like, do you want me to go on a missionary trip to some kind of desert? Do you want my firstborn? What do you want, Lord? Do you know what I mean? Like, what kind of gift is this? You know, and you know, when you know, because the Sultan, his son, his grandson, they died. I know a deacon in my former church who was on the plane who died. Mothers with 4 children, a mother with 4 children died. So who am I? You know, but you know, God uses the meek and the foolish things of this world to confound the wisdom of the wise, because there was no reason for me to survive. And so for 2 years I was depressed, and it was in 2008 November. By that time I was in the UK, my church in Cardiff.
So you would think you would go through a plane crash and you'd be happy and excited that you survived.
No, because
but you were actually depressed.
yes, and because I mean, people, they meant well, but they kept saying, "Oh, God has a special plan for your life. God has a purpose for your life." And I'm like, "Yeah, really? What purpose is this, Lord? I don't want." Do you know what I mean? It's too much. I didn't ask for this, you know. And so the next 2 years, I actually felt like a part of me had died, you know. And so it was in the church then that something broke, because God said, "But you know that salvation is a bigger gift. So I saved you in this life, which is full of its sufferings and everything else, but salvation for eternity is much glorious, is a much more glorious miracle than this." And so I was able to accept the gift, and I said to God, even if I spend the rest of my life just praising and giving the testimony of the plane crash, you know, that's what I would do.
Wow. So what happened after that?
Right, so I say from then I entered what I would call my wilderness period.
Okay.
And for the next 7 years after that, I felt like God was dealing with me on the road to surrender. Because growing up, I had a lot of why questions for God. You know, I trusted God in some areas, but there's some areas that I said, you know what, God, actually, no, we're not going to do this. You know, you stay where you are, I'll stay where I am. You know, I'm not going to disturb you, you don't disturb me. Devil, I'm not going to disturb you, you don't disturb me. But that was a mistake, because the devil doesn't stop because you say you're not going to, you know, be part of his kingdom. There's no sitting on the fence. You're either for God or you're for the devil. And the devil's main aim is to kill, to steal, and to destroy. You know, so all the things that the devil used to afflict me with, I used to blame God for. And so it was in August 2014 that I got to a place where I could be honest with God, just like David. And I said, God, I have all these why questions. What is it? Why did you allow this to happen? Why did you allow every single issue that I had held against God, that had stopped me from becoming close to God? I laid them, you know, down at his feet. And he gave me this passage in Exodus that says, I bore you out of Egypt on eagle's wings. And then he explained to me that every single thing that I went through was meant to kill me, was meant to break me, was meant to destroy me. There's a limit to what God can do until you surrender. Because God is not going to force us. He's not going to force us against our will, but he will protect us until we get to the point where we can actually surrender to God. And that's what he did. And so when
the enemy is just coming with all his
lies,
antics, but God just keeps
he keeps you, because I feel like all the things I went through, in fact, I should have been dead, literally. I should have been dead. And so when I saw that and something broke, you know, the walls came down and I was able to fully surrender to God. And so later that year, I moved back to Nigeria to, you know, be with my now husband, you know, and that in itself was another journey of faith. Because when I moved back to Nigeria, so I was already on a PhD program at the time.
So I was going to ask.
Yes, please.
In terms of flying, so was it, how did you?
Okay, good, that's a very good, yes. So after the plane crash, I was in the general hospital for three days. And the question now became, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? Am I going to go back to Sokoto to complete my service? Am I going to go back to Lagos? Literally, I was in the middle. It was 9 hours by road to Sokoto, 9 hours by road to Lagos. And so my mom says, you're not going back. You know, you're not going back to Sokoto. So that was settled. I remember one of my friends calling at the time, and he worked with Virgin Nigeria, and he said that God did not save you on Sunday to kill you on Wednesday. So, you know, you fly back. And I feel like I needed to do that. And so, yes, and I was like, okay, cool. I was just happy to be going home. And so on the Wednesday, I got to the airport, saw the plane, and I started weeping. I was crying. And the airport manager came and said, oh, would you like to see the pilot? And I saw the pilot, and my dad still calls me a racist for this. I saw the pilot, and they were, you know, white people. So I said, okay, they know what they're doing, you know. And so they said, do you want to sit with us in the cockpit? I said, do I look like I'm mad? Do you guys fly this plane and let us get there, you know? But I want to sit at the back of the plane. And literally for the hour and a half of the flight, I held my my housemate, because she was with me, housemate on one hand, and I don't know who the random stranger I held on the other hand, but I held them and I was crying throughout. Wow. You know, but I feel like if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to get on the plane. And so getting on the plane so soon after that, you know, helped.
So now flying, is it easier for you?
Yeah, flying is good. I mean, the first couple of times when I flew, there was a panic. You know, the heart, oh Lord, please. But now.
And for your mom, does she still fast like 3 days?
Yeah.
Or the fear? Because now, I guess for her now, it's like, prior to this, she would fast and then think, okay, it's the fasting and prayer. But when you had the crash, she didn't even have an idea.
Exactly.
So it was all about God.
Always.
And I don't know if that gave her some peace that God is the one in control.
Definitely, you know, but being a mom, you don't stop worrying, you know, and she too, she didn't.
Because her greatest fear became a reality.
Do you know what I mean? And so, but she still didn't travel, but thank God, God broke that even, because she flew in 2014 for my brother's wedding, and she still flew again to be with me for the birth of my daughter, so thank God for that healing.
Okay. So tell us about Girl Talk Conference.
Right, so Girl Talk was birthed in October 2014. This was just before I was going to move back to Nigeria. And I was walking on the road one day, and I just felt God say, you need to start some kind of fellowship. Now, a lot of mistakes I made in my Christian journey, I felt like I wouldn't have made it if I had a fellowship like Girl Talk. Why do I say that? A lot of things happen when we're in isolation. If you've been a Christian for a long period of time, there's some questions that people don't expect you to ask, even though you have them on your heart and on your mind. And so if you're a strong woman, you've gotten to the point where you just shove everything to the background and just keep moving. People ask you, how are you doing? But they don't really care for the answer because they feel like you have everything together. And so it's almost like, who do I tell my problems? I don't feel like I can talk to God because it almost feels like a sacrilege. How can I ask you these why questions when you are God? You know, but then
like they say, don't question God.
Don't question God. But you have questions. Like, God, if you're so good, why? If you're so good, why? And we all have those why places. Why? Why this, Lord? And so it came to my mind to create a safe space, an intimate space for people to feel safe to share all their questions. Nobody's judging you. And at that time, I made the decision to make myself as vulnerable as possible. So I said, I'm ready to share all my questions, all my experiences. I'm ready to lay it out there. It's a form of trust. So I give you this, so you know you're not alone. Whatever you've been through, I've probably been through worse. You know,
it's a forum for
to share.
So, but okay, so it's a free. It's free conference?
So it was, no, you're talking about the fellowship now before we get to the conference. Okay. And so the fellowship, is online, so it's like an email thread.
Okay.
So Wednesday is our fellowship day.
Okay.
So I usually send stuff on Wednesday almost to kickstart the discussion, and people use that as a platform to share whatever is on their mind. Okay. And I thank God because we've been consistent since we started. So since October 2014 up until this year.
How many are you now?
We're about 60 odd.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay. So now you're hosting your first conference.
Right, about that. So, you know.
First of all,
yes,
the
please.
audacity to write on your flyer. This is a free conference hosted by Jesus Christ.
Hosted by God and convened by Jesus Christ. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
That was bold.
Well, that was the instruction.
Yeah.
That was the instruction. And so, I'll tell you, because, you know, before we started, you know, asking me, what's your background? And I was one of those people that thought, oh, I would have this high-flying career, you know, and that was my plan.
I mean, you have 2 masters and a PhD. Hello.
I wanted to use it for something. Do you know what I mean? You know, like, oh, and marketing, I thought, oh, I was going to be C-suite level, this, that. But when I moved back, people were like, oh, they're looking for you in Nigeria. They need your kind of people. And people were knocking on the right doors, but no door was opening. And I said, the devil doesn't have this kind of power over my life. So, Lord, you're trying to get my attention. What is happening? And so in frustration, in January this year, I cried out to God, you know, like, God, what's going on? And I spoke to my husband and I said, I don't know what's going on. This thing is not happening. What is all this? And he said, do you want to hear from God? I said, yes. He now said, okay, do this. Go on a retreat for the next 3 days and use these 2 scriptures. Jeremiah that says, ask me and I'll show you great and mighty things that you do not know. And Psalm 32 verse 8 that says, I will direct you along the best pathway for your life. And so I went and I said, God, I want you to talk to me about these 3 things. Not in this particular order, but in my heart, in this particular order. Thank you very much. My career, the PhD, and ministry was last. But I said, feel free to talk to me in any order that you like. And so for the first day, he spoke to me about ministry, and then he gave me the blueprint for this Girl Talk conference. He told me the theme, which is renew, refresh, and recharge.
And you're using one of the most, if not the most expensive venues in Nigeria, and it's free.
When he told me Echo Hotel, I was like,
That
no
must be
problem,
fake.
because I didn't think it was this year. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, okay, Echo Hotel, all right, yeah, Echo Hotel, cool. You know, he said I should talk to these people. He said, you know, this is what I want to do. This is the goal. This is the mission. And I'm like, okay, thank you for this. But I thought it was a future thing. And then the next day, the PhD said it's done. I said, how can it be done? If I don't have to write this thing, it's different. Do you mean, what do you mean it's done? He said, it's done. Then the third day, career day, I ended up repenting of my vain ambition and laying my life at his feet. And so with a series of so many testimonies I can't even begin to describe to you.
Unfortunately, we don't have that
I
much
know,
time.
but it began to crystallize that the conference was supposed to be this year. There was a sense of urgency. And so it now became, Echo Hotel, really, Lord? Really? This is where you want us to go? How can we start at this level? And many times when I wanted to give up or lose faith, he would just send encouragement. And now the conference is a week away, and that can only be God. That can only really be God.
Fantastic. So if people would like to know about the conference, your details, we'll put your details on the screen.
Right.
Who are the speakers?
Right. Well, so I'll be speaking.
Okay.
She'll be speaking. Hello. And then we also have Larry Olushola, the Catalyst, and then we have Bumi George of Shredder Gang.
Okay, what time does it start?
8 a.m. on Monday morning.
Okay.
And it's a full day, so 8 to 5 p.m.
8 to 5 p.m.
Yes.
Okay, and like you said, it's free.
It's free.
They should
It's
just
free, but you
come.
have to register.
Okay.
You have to register.
So how will they
You can
register?
connect with us on 3 platforms. So we have the website, which is www.girltalk.org.ng, and the registration form is on it. You can also connect with us on Facebook. So on Facebook, which is Girl Talk, God in Real Life.
Okay.
Because girl is an acronym for God in Real Life. And then we're on Instagram, Girl Talk _God in Real Life. And all the links to the forms are on each of these platforms.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. We've unfortunately run out of time. Honestly, I wish we had like 10 episodes to talk, because you're just full of so many testimonies, but I want to encourage you and say thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for following through with the vision that God has given you, and I know many people will be blessed
Amen.
by coming to this conference.
Amen.
And so hopefully we'll have you on the show again.
Yes,
soon.
please. Thank you
and
so much.
good luck
Thank you.
with everything.
Thank you.
Viewers, we hope you have enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to be part of the Girl Talk conference, the details are on the screen. Do not miss it for anything. You can see that God is doing has done and is doing remarkable things in Esther's life. And so we can just imagine the great things he's going to do at the conference. See you there. Until next week, stay blessed.